Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our July 3rd Tuesday at 3 webcast series event, Pandemics, Politics, and Preparing for What's Next. My name is Alan Falcon. I'm the CEO and Pragmatic Evangelist here at Cumulus Global. I want to thank you for joining us here today and taking time out of your busy day or week, either to join us live or to watch this recording on demand from our website. As with all of our webcasts today, before we get into the content, a couple of housekeeping items to take care of. First off, you'll notice that all the audio lines are muted. That helps prevent any background noise from interfering with the session. So if at any point in time in the conversation today you have a question or a comment, you'll notice along the top or right-hand side of the screen some icons. One of them opens a questions window. That is the best place to ask me a question. It lets me track and make sure we get them all answered before we wrap up here today. The session is being recorded. We'll halt that recording before we go into the open Q&A session after the presentation towards the end of the hour, or about 40 minutes from now. I'll answer questions that come in along the way if I catch them and if appropriate. We'll generally have the session up posted on our website within 24 hours. Feel free to share. We'll send you a link to that recording. Feel free to share with any associates if you think they might find the content valuable. Given everything that's happening right now in the world around COVID-19, and as we're going to talk about pandemics and politics, there's a lot more focus on how technology can help companies succeed, particularly when staff are working remotely in different shapes or forms. And so we've got a number of short webcasts on demand. These are part of our Coffee and Cloud series, talking about safe and securing when folks are, your environment when people are working from home, and ways to manage teams successfully if you're using G Suite or Office 365. Those Coffee and Cloud sessions tend to be shorter than our monthly sessions here. I believe each of those runs about 18 to 20 minutes long. And of course, if you view that recording and you opt to receive one, we'll send you a coffee gift card for either Dunkin' or Starbucks if you like any of those brews. We also have some great resources on our homepage. As things have sort of settled in with the CARES Act and as we wait on the next round, we've been updating the information we have there, but we've got links to blog posts that have current information, not only with technology resources, but business resources. We've been a pretty aggressive source in providing information about PPP loans, other relief operations, open and closing considerations, CDC guidance. So not just us trying to sell you stuff, there's a lot of useful information that we found as business owners that we wanted to share out with you. If you have any questions, if you have other ideas for topics you want us to cover, info@cumulusglobal.com, or I'll share my email address with you towards the end of the session. Contact me directly. So with the housekeeping out of the way, want to talk a little bit about, start out with, as the title suggests, pandemics, COVID-19 and business and what's going to happen as we move forward, where we are and where we're going. Okay, and so sort of pulled this up, the source is Johns Hopkins University. This was actually as published by Newsweek over the weekend, as you can see through the date. This is where we are today with COVID-19 on a national basis. Now, clearly, infection rates, death rates, the impact on the economy varies not only state by state, but oftentimes within the geography of each state. It can vary greatly based on where you're physically located. But I think it's important to get a sense of where we are, is that in the comparison between the US and the EU is really because we have similar size populations and generally similar demographics as far as other factors that could impact the spread of COVID-19. So very clearly EU, which had, on a country basis, had in many cases much more severe lockdown in direction, they're clearly out of the first wave. Their cases went up, their cases came down, and they've been able to keep a relatively low and stable rate of infection, dealing with hotspots, small hotspots or flare-ups that they might occur. Where the U.S. is, we're in a very different situation. We had a surge in March into mid-April. We started to see, we responded. Several states had pretty serious lockdowns, others delayed. We saw a drop, we saw an uptick. More states went into lockdown through May and the early part of June, and then we were in decline, but a very slow decline, in part because some states to this point in time don't require masks, or don't even recommend masks. It's a request. It's even a lower level. And so a lot of people aren't necessarily taking what science tells us now are the best preventative measures. And so since mid-June, we've seen a rapid, increase. And so when we look at where we are in the US and how we plan for our businesses, um, our trend isn't just, isn't going to be a set of waves at this point. It looks more like, and I don't know if the right analogy is tsunami or hurricane, but we're still in the first wave, and we had that wave and it crested and we got a little decline, and now we're in the tidal surge that comes in and it's just flooding us with cases right now. And again, certain areas of the country, this isn't the case. Cases are still relatively low or maintained that way. Other areas of the country, we know that they're running out of hospital beds and IC units, and patients are being driven hours and hours and hours to find them a place to be treated. And this is important to keep in mind as we talk about pandemics and politics and planning for what's next, because this indicates that all of the assumptions about COVID-19 would be, hey, it's a springtime thing. We'll lock down, we'll open up carefully, we'll maintain it, we'll get back to a stable economy, but that is not happening. And right now, it's hard to predict when that even might happen. And I don't want to get into the politics and who you think is right or wrong. I'm just saying that right now, literally, there is no national strategy. We've got guidance coming out of the NIH and the CDC that isn't necessarily what's being promoted by the politicians in both parties. The intensity of the infection and the restrictions are definitely varying not only by state, but local municipalities, counties, and regions within states. And in many cases, we see that states and local leaders are not even in sync on what they should be doing and how they should be addressing it. And therefore, resource application is a challenge. Many states that opened up or never fully shut down are now slowing their openings, or in many cases, even reversing directions. And the whole issue around protective measures in what's reasonable for, and expected for people to participate in has become politicized. And so you've got people not taking protective measures and businesses not taking protective measures as a matter of principle. Map this against sort of how the relief system was set up for businesses as far as where we are as business owners. None of the relief measures passed to date accounted for the length of duration we're seeing. They all assumed that we'd get through a wave, and really by the end of July, we'd be at the tail end of that wave, worst case, and we'd be able to then maintain, a relatively low but steady, not rising rate of cases and rate of positive tests. And that would allow the economy to continue to open up in steps, and we'd open up carefully, but we'd open up once. And that was really the basis of the CARES Act and the legislation before it as far as funding. So the CARES Act that was passed does not accommodate a cycle of opening, and closing. There's no provision that says, hey, you laid off workers, you brought them back, things are going, but now where your customers are, they have to shut down, your business drops off, you're gonna have to lay off again. But the system and the relief packages and the loans that are out there are not designed for that. And so we've got a business conflict now where some people are feeling that the open closing cycle will be more damaging to businesses than a single longer shutdown was or would have been. Okay, and so when we look at sort of our understanding in our businesses and how we operate, for us as a company, we're a small business, we're headquartered in Massachusetts. We have an office in Georgia. The political climate, the infection rates, the case rates, the hospitalization rates, the restrictions in those two locations are radically different. So each of our offices needs to adapt to the local. But it's not just our locations we're worried about our customers' locations as well. As a cloud company, you may be aware, we service clients across the whole US, and we know that when we're talking to someone in New Hampshire, that their situation is going to be very different than our customers in Arizona, in California, in Georgia, in Alabama, and in Florida. And so we have to be sensitive. And so in understanding that, it's important that we as business owners to understand where the pandemic is and how it can affect our business isn't just to be aware of what's happening where we're located, but to actively ask the customers what's going on and to track those changes over time and to even learn industry impacts. So We know, for example, that our hospitality, customer base, restaurants, hotels, event companies are seeing an impact that's very different than some of the aspects of our customers who are in marketing, PR, and advertising. Some are seeing growth, others are not in that industry. We also see uptick for some of our manufacturing clients based on what they manufacture, or they've adapted and switched to PPE, and they're having a growth in their business and a shift in their business. And so talking to customers, I guess the first piece of advice today is gain that understanding. Understand your customer plans, short-term and long-term. And now would be a good time, given that it looks like this is going to be a long-term event. Have they started thinking about how their business is going to change, both in the midterm and the long term? So now let's talk a little bit about the politics. And really, there's some fundamental changes that are happening politically in our society right now that come into play that are affecting our businesses and how we're going to respond and what comes next, and preparing for what comes next. And there are a couple of things, again, I feel like, oh man, never talk about politics or religion, right? But it's important to talk about politics. And again, doesn't matter which side of these issues you fall on or how you view these issues. The fact is, the issue themselves are having an impact on our businesses and on the economy. And so, immigration, for most of the types of businesses we work with, most small, mid-sized businesses, those who hire workers on student visas that are allowed to work, or other work visa programs, in the last few months, by executive order, there have been some radical changes to the student and work visa programs, which will have the effect of seriously limiting certain talent pools. And it'll affect certain areas of the country more than others. Certainly politically, the Black Lives Matter movement is creating a new awareness and new expectations around social justice, fairness, and equity. And it's great to see, businesses that believe in that, stating that and wanting to act on it. And that has an impact on the overall business climate as well. We're in an election cycle, right? And part of that election cycle, because elections are often driven by the state of the economy, is there is a push to create or even to force economic activity by some quarters. And this isn't a Republican-Democrat thing. I see it on both sides of the aisle. That there's a push to really decide what's going to make the economy healthiest, or for their particular candidate. And there are other factors around the election cycle that affect short-term policy that will affect our business climate and what we have to prepare for and be ready for. And then finally, the politics of COVID-19. Evidence now from some investigative journalists, from some think tanks, both on the right and on the left, are saying that the setbacks that are happening as businesses that have opened now have to close down again are probably going to have a greater impact than the original lockdowns. And with relief packages coming to an end, even though there are negotiations happening this week between Congress and the White House and the different divisions within Congress on Capitol Hill, there's no clear path forward for what the next round of economic stimulus, relief packages, or even steps towards economic recovery are going to be. And there's certainly, at this point today, Tuesday afternoon, July 21st, there's no consensus, right? It's just not there yet. Now, will something come through? I hope so. Will it be the right thing? Maybe, probably, maybe not sure. But there's politics now around COVID because it relates to the fact that it's an election cycle. And that comes into play as well. And it will have potentially a dramatic impact on the business climate, the economy, in certain markets. So what comes next? And what we see is, in our opinion, what's coming next is a convergence of the pandemic and the politics. And it's creating some serious challenges for businesses. One is, probably, just the overall economic uncertainty. Is the economy stable? Technically we're in a recession. Are we feeling that? Unemployment, the rate of unemployment is dropping in some areas. In other areas, the growth in unemployment is slowing, which is a positive trend. In other areas, recent gains in lowering unemployment numbers are lost now as businesses shutter for a second time and as things close. So we look at the level of economic activity and how do you project what it's going to look like over the next 6 months to a year, so you can plan your business around it. And quite frankly, we just don't know. And what makes it more complex is that the political divisions around the impact of the pandemic, around the impact of the demand for social change, make it harder to predict where the economy is going to go. And what you should count on as a business owner as far as your customer base, your client base, and the markets you serve. There's some specific things I want to talk about where we see some challenges and some opportunities in sort of rethinking and ways that technology can help you in that as you adapt to the uncertainty and the changing times. The first topic is staffing. And in talking to other business owners, what we're hearing and what we're seeing is that businesses with open positions are actually having trouble in local hiring, right? And that might sound counterintuitive. Part of this is because if there are businesses that often use or need special skills that are here on visa, the fact that those workers aren't here or can't come here is limiting the ability to hire local into your office. The second aspect is there is some disconnect between people who are unemployed and the jobs that they might be qualified for and available. We could do a whole hour on why that disconnect seems to exist and what people can do about it. But we look at people hiring locally for people to work in their offices, we're still seeing higher competition for specific skills, that the labor market hasn't eased to the point that that's not an issue. We see that businesses should expect that people are going to want or need to work remote, either because of COVID-19 and their comfort level about coming into an office, or you've broadened your range of searches and you're looking outside of your geography, or you're looking at other factors as well. And so there's an opportunity there as well. When you think about the current awareness around diversity and inclusion, it's actually a good opportunity and some fortuitous timing that as people are out of work and looking for new opportunities, it opens up more thought process among individuals for changing career directions or possibly changing industry or applying their skills in a different way. It means more available candidates are out there if you're looking and you're recruiting in the right spots. And so there's an opportunity to sort of take advantage of the timing if you've got open recs you're planning on hiring, to put your commitments at the level you have them, diversity inclusion, into practice. What we're also seeing with staffing is a whole new round of resume gaps. And the challenge here is you see someone who's worked through late January, early February, or maybe into March, or even as late as May of this year. And it's not an unfair expectation that layoffs were COVID related, but we also know that businesses are still letting go of people who are underperforming. And yes, the fiscal pressure of COVID might spur some of those layoffs, but there's a difference between a company saying because of COVID-19, we have to lay off 25% of our workforce, to saying, hey, COVID-19 is putting some pressure on. It would help if we cut payroll costs. We've got some underperformers. Let's thin the workforce and move on. So as you look, and one of the challenges in staffing right now is how do you evaluate whether the person is a good performer who got caught in a financial downturn for the company, or that they're an underperformer who was let go because the company wanted to save money and it sort of helped the decision along. And so when we look at staffing and we look at technology and how that can help, a few things come into play. One is, again, in talking to multiple business owners and doing some informal surveys, and even in our own experience, a lot of companies today with tools like LinkedIn and Indeed and others will often post and wait. We'll do the post, we'll wait for people to respond and submit their application and resume, we'll filter them, go through the process, blah, blah, blah. Now's a good time to search and recruit and to think about who has the skills, what type of people will have the skills that are most important to the job. And so for us, oftentimes, and I look at my own business, the people skills and the customer service skills are often harder to train So if someone has those skills, we can teach, and they're able to learn, we can teach them the technology, and they can be very successful with us. So think about where and go out and search and actually recruit. We're finding that with a lot of people unemployed. We're in talking with and having recently worked with a number of college recruiting, college career placement offices. Many colleges and universities are offering expanded services to alumni who find themselves out of work, not just to take advantage of their existing alumni networks, but provide a place for employers. So for example, handshake.com, it's a national tool that many career offices use to match jobs that you qualify to post to their student population as well as their alumni. And so even though you're talking with the college recruiting office, if you've got positions or you're looking to staff and you're looking for that person who's moving into their second, third, or fourth job, college recruiting tools actually can be very beneficial right now, where oftentimes you might only be getting the recent college graduates. It's an opportunity to seek out diverse candidates. Again, it's where you post, how you advertise, how you respond. Where technology can help, a really good video conferencing tool, whether it's Microsoft Teams or Google Meets. Do those because you'll be doing most of your interviews, if not all of them, remote. And so you still might want the phone screen, but at some point you're going to need the video interview. You're going to need to see the body language. Again, we're seeing higher competition for staff with specific skills, and the likelihood that people, even if they are geographically close to you, are going to want remote work. And one of the strategies, we've talked to a couple of companies that often hire H-1B and other work visa employees. Their strategy right now is to hire as if they're hiring 1B, but have those people work remotely from the countries in which they live, and just not worry about them physically coming and being on premise. And it's a different style of offshoring activities, but it makes for, if you need that skill set and you can find that employee, it makes for a good opportunity. One of the side impacts of staffing and opening up your geography, not just your physical location, knowing that you expect remote work, because let's face it, an employee working remotely who lives 10 minutes from the office, who we expect may never come into the office, is not much different than an employee working remotely in another time zone, or 20 miles away or 100 miles away. One of the challenges of hiring workers remotely, obviously, is if you have people working in other states, that can create, there's certainly payroll tax issues, and it can create income tax and other tax issues that you would certainly want to understand and have systems in place to manage. So remote work, long and the short of it, here to say this is where technology really comes into play. Our expectation is that remote is going to be a necessary part of our work life for the foreseeable future, and to some degree, probably permanently. A number of companies have already said that they're going to allow most workers who are able to work from home if and when they want. They now realize in some cases they see higher productivity. So it's a changing view of office space, that there's certain functions that probably need to be office space, but many don't, and other are going to be employee preference. Here in the New England area, there have already been some fairly large employers who have announced that, given the number of employees they expect to want to work from home on an ongoing basis, even after COVID-19 ends, that they are not renewing leases, and they're vacating buildings and lowering that part of their operating costs. What we also know about, and we're starting to learn about work from home, particularly as people adapt to this, is that there are factors in remote work, particularly some potentially long-term personal impacts of remote work that are still unclear. And so there have been a couple of surveys in the last couple of months where employees who used to work in the office, who are working remotely now, might be more productive, but they have more often times when they feel alone or lonely. And so there's a social aspect and a human aspect to remote work that are going to need to be dealt with. And so if you think about it, some of the human resource issues that your company might be dealing with or have dealt with in the past, some of those are going to shift. And it's going to shift from beyond some of the procedural stuff and office politics stuff, it's probably going to either shift or expand to include some of the issues of people who might in remote work feel isolated socially or even professionally. And as I mentioned earlier, remote work can bring you into new jurisdictions. So you got to loop in the lawyers, you got to loop in the accountants. You have to understand how this could impact you. So when you have remote work, it's a technology factor, and technology can really support that. We'll get into that. First and foremost, make sure your remote employees have an effective office space. It's not enough if someone's going to be working remotely for the long term for them to be at their dining room or their kitchen table with the kids running around and the dog in the background, right? That might work in the short term. It's probably not feasible in the long term. Also know that if someone is working at home as part of their job and it's an authorized workspace from the company, that you as the owner of the company still have some responsibility to make sure that work environment is safe, which means they have an appropriate chair, an appropriate desk, appropriate ventilation and lighting, et cetera, et cetera. And so help your office. We've ourselves have offered employees, if they don't have a suitable desk chair, obviously we'll order and ship it to them so that they're comfortable and able to work without doing damage to their back or their hips or their legs, whatever. As well as making sure they have good lighting. And then we get into the technology. You want to equip your remote workers. In the short term, when everyone's scrambled to work from home, it's great that your employees had a PC at home with their family photos on it that they could sit on and work. But long term, that's not viable. That opens your environment up to risks. You need different policies and procedures if people are using personal equipment for work. We'll get into that in a little bit. You want to make sure they have the right power, the right tools, the right connectivity, and the right security. And so that may mean investing in laptops. It might mean investing in accessories like headsets, mice, microphones, things of that nature that your employees need to work. Second screens for home, power strips to protect your equipment. If you're going to allow employees to use personal device, now's a good time to step back and look at your personal device policies and your general use of technology policies and update them to accommodate it. So for example, you've got someone who's going to be working from home, is their internet speed, is their broadband internet service sufficient for the demand and what their job is? If not, is it their responsibility to upgrade, or are you going to reimburse them for the differential and upgrading for what they would have normally for home and what you need them to have for business? If they're using personal devices, you have a responsibility to your business and to your customers to keep information private and secure. Do you have policies that say, hey, if you're using your personal device, we still need to install company-approved malware and virus protection on it? And we still want to make sure that the company data that might be on that machine is backed up and protected properly. And so looking at that, you want to equip your remote workers. Personal devices can be a challenge. It can be manageable. You need those policies in place, and you have to look at the whole situation. And really think about, just as you'd equip someone to work successfully physically in your office, you need to equip them to be successful at home. It's just that you as the employer don't have full control over that environment. And so to put the pieces in place to make sure that the environment is safe and secure and appropriate and performs well will require some policies and potentially some negotiation and figuring out what's the right balance, what's the right mix. The fourth bullet point here is social interaction and support. Again, I mentioned earlier, there's some early studies now that are finding that even though employees are generally more productive, more employees are reporting bouts of feeling alone or loneliness and feeling not only socially but professionally disconnected from their peers. It's those interim interactions. And so build into your work from home plan to have that social interaction. And there are a couple ways to do it. One, some of the technology helps. The social thread technology, whether it's Teams or the new Google Chat or Slack, that let people have the offhand conversation that they might have passing in the hall, post an accomplishment, get the emoji icons back saying good job, whatever, ask the question of people, engage people in conversations that aren't directly work related, and allow and support some of that to happen so that, hey, if you've got 5 employees who love a particular TV show, just like they might bump into each other in the hall and talk about last night's episode, get that healthy social interaction and feeling of belonging in the office. If everyone's working remotely, having a space and allowing for someone to go on to one of the social thread tools you have and say, hey, I know anyone else they're a fan of the show, what did you think of last night's episode? And have that 5-minute conversation online that they would have had in the office, and support that mechanism, and support if employees want to do book groups or movie groups or TV groups, whatever, support some of that club concept to encourage employees to interact and socialize with each other beyond just the work, even if it's at the end of the workday, before, during lunch, whatever. The last bullet point is supervision change. It's very difficult, and it's not difficult, it's just very different to supervise employees who are working remotely. You're not seeing them and interacting them casually. It takes an explicit act to interact with someone. So it's important that managers and supervisors, team leaders understand the need to connect, to get feedback, to engage, and to be able to read some of the social cues that someone might be saying everything's fine when it really isn't. And that's some skills that come involved. And again, the tools can help. Defaulting to video conferencing and video chatting as opposed to instant messaging is one way, knowing that 55% of all communication is nonverbal. And even though it's harder to pick up nonverbal communication in a video session when you've got a tight frame of reference around someone's head or upper torso and shoulders, you still can pick up, and it's still better than just a text or an instant message, an email message, or even a phone call. And so engaging and having supervisors engage their teams, not just with team meetings, but individual one-on-ones, and fostering cross-communication is an important part of it. And we now have technology in place that can facilitate those communications and help with that process, and make it become an organic part of the workday. Go there. Another issue you have to focus on as we prepare for what's next is security. And I thought about the track I was going to take on this, and at first it was like, oh man, we should all be terrified. The rate of new cyber threats is growing again. The number of cyber attacks is growing again. The COVID-19 with remote work create new vectors of attack and new types of attack that we're starting to see an increase in the number of victims. And most important to know is that, particularly as people who haven't historically worked remotely are now working remotely, and we're sort of beyond this, hey, it's a temporary thing, that some people will be working remotely in full or in part for an extended period of time. It's really time to step back and recognize, hey, your security envelope has changed, right? It's protecting the people themselves and their identities. It's protecting your data, your systems, and your devices. And you need a holistic approach. You need you need to protect from multiple attack vectors, and you need to understand how everything works together. And we see increasing risks being triggered by the move to remote work and sort of the short-term scramble that we need to adjust and address as we head into a long-term scenario. First and foremost is shadow IT, right? Hey, scrambling to get from home. Oh my goodness, I'm out of the office. I'm going to dial in or connect into a PC or a server, download my files, work on it. I need to share it with a customer. Ugh. I'm going to use a personal Dropbox account to do that because it's fast and easy. And I think I can do it with my existing systems, but I'm not sure how. That kind of shadow IT, the company loses control of its information, its customers' information. It puts the employee, the company, and the customer at risk. BYOD, again, we talked about this earlier, in the scramble for people to start working from home, a lot of people said, hey, don't worry, I've got a desktop sitting on at home. Well, you don't know how well it's secured, how well it's protected from malware, even if it's even running a secure operating system, and if it's even running current versions of applications. So BYOD, you have to address from a policy and procedure standpoint, as well as offer the supports you need so that personal devices come into the environment in a secure and protected way and are managed as such. The other thing that we start to see is complexity, right? And it's interesting because as we reached out to clients to see how they were adapting, it did surprise us, the number of times we called the main number, and in the scramble to get people home, they forwarded the main number to the company to a particular receptionist or other employee. And when that person's answering that phone, they don't have the ability to transfer to someone else. We see companies saying, "Oh my goodness, hey, we're going to work from home. It's an emergency thing. Oh, but we've got Office 365, so we'll use OneDrive and stuff." And next thing you know, even though they have the ability to do Teams and have great virtual meetings that way, they're like, "Oh my goodness, we need to pay for Zoom." And we start adding redundant services and increasing our costs, or adding complexity to the environment rather than making sure we optimize what we do. And that complexity increases risks because anytime you add another system, you add another identity that needs to be coordinated. Typically, these services interact with each other. There's federation. And so a breach in one service can lead to a breach in other services. And employees start to do things like use the same password for multiple systems to simplify their lives. And so at the same time, we're seeing a changing configuration of our IT infrastructure that makes us more vulnerable to attacks. We see attackers being more aggressive because they see the opportunity. The fact that we scrambled to work remotely has increased risks. And now is the time again to step back, assess your security envelope, assess the infrastructure, how you're supporting work at home, with the expectation we're going to be at home for a while. And that complexity is sort of where I go next, because what we see in talking with folks is, we'll go and say, "Hey, you're running G Suite, but you're paying for Zoom. Why not use Google Meets?" And it's like, well, everyone uses Zoom. It's easy. They know what they're doing. And we haven't really used Meets that much. And what I'm really hearing is it's easier to spend money, and it's easier to have my users have to take more steps to schedule an appointment or manage a call than it is to actually show them how to do it with the tools we already have. And to me, it's nuts, right? You have tools that integrate, that make it easy to schedule, to include the video conferencing for people to join. Yep, it might not be the tool they're using to talk to their relatives over the weekends or at night when they have Zoom calls with their family and friends. That's true, but it's secure, it integrates with your environment, and it prevents the company from having not only to pay for an additional service, but to deal with the security of that service. So the more complex your environment becomes and the more duplication, it actually fosters even additional shadow IT. Oh, the company has X, some people use Y, but I like Z. They're using Y, I'm going to use Z, it's okay, right? It sort of sets an expectation that it's okay. And all of this starts to really complicate your security and allows for data loss and an increased chance of a breach or another form of attack. On top of that, the complexity increases costs, not only in lost user productivity, not only in licensing, but the amount of time it takes to administer the environment. If your staff and team can be properly equipped to do their jobs efficiently with one tool, that's better than providing them 3 tools to work efficiently and operate. And so there's advantage in simplification. Now, with that, simplification is actually one of the benefits of cloud, because, as we know with cloud, you're giving direct access to your applications, your data, without the need to remote into a PC, without the need to use VPN, without the need to manually download something and load it back up, or to run multiple different file sync and share services. It puts the data in one place. You can have version control, you can have permissions, it can be held private, it can be secure, it can be managed. Additionally, with cloud, you get integrated services, right? And G Suite, Google with G Suite, and Microsoft with Microsoft 365 Business and the Office 365 Enterprise licensing have different packages of integrated services and have a different approach, but the underlying philosophy is the same, which is, hey, I've got services that are designed to work together that can share, a user has one identity that gives them access and comparable access across all of those services. And they're integrated in a way that I don't need to, pick and choose and administratively and as a user figure out how to get tool A to work with tool B. And most importantly, it gives you that controlled environment. And remember, people aren't sitting in a physical office behind on a physical network, wired or wireless, with a physical firewall and physical protections that keep all of the data and all of the information and all the devices and all of the people within that physical location protected from the cyber threats and other problems, right? Now you've got people in different locations. And so it's not the physical boundary anymore, right? So cloud gives you the ability to control your environment around user identity, around overall security of people, of applications of data protection as far as data loss prevention, privacy, backup recovery, business continuity, and even providing, a great example of this is remote desktop services, right? So people are working from home. They've got personal machines there. You don't necessarily want to buy everyone a machine to have at home. That's great. Remote desktop services says, okay, all we're going to use that personal computer for is to provide screen and keyboard access to a remote desktop that runs in a high performance data center, secure network that is their desktop. It's where they work. They can print, they can save, they have access to the applications, they have access to the cloud. It all comes into play. And so you can control, depending on the needs of your business, cloud gives you a better ability to control that environment. That's not to say there aren't challenges with cloud. One of the biggest challenges we see right now is user adoption, right? And that we look at customers who are running G Suite who will look and say, you know what? I'm running G Suite, but I've got Google Meets with, standard phone dial-in capability and international dial-in. I can record those meetings and save them. And people say, nevertheless, we're paying for GoToMeeting, we're paying for WebEx, we're paying for Zoom. It's duplicate, right? It's a user adoption issue. It's helping users understand all of the features and capabilities of the tools they're used to using, as well as the tools that are in those productivity suites that they're not using today. We see it on the Microsoft side with underutilization of Teams and the communication tools there, the underutilization of groups, users and administrators not understanding how OneDrive and SharePoint are used differently to deploy file services, and the pros and cons of each and where you want to place your data depends on the type of utilization you need for the file data you're protecting and storing. So user adoption, some program of education that lets users, based on their roles and responsibilities, understand the tools that will help them be most productive is important. Duplication of services, again, people move into the cloud, but they never shed the services that duplicate what they're buying. And I've talked about this. I won't go into it again because I've talked about it. It's an administrative headache. It's a money headache. It's an information security and protection headache. The next is the workflow, right? And changing to optimize the fact that you're using cloud. And this correlates with user adoption quite a bit, but it's also a step back saying, hey, wait a minute. This process, the process to get a proposal out the door is we have a library here. People assemble the proposal. They send it to ABC. It gets reviewed. We're emailing attachments around versus, the documents where it's supposed to be, send the link, have people edit, the version control and the commenting is built in. Minor changes in workflows with an understanding of how the environment works can go a long way to improving productivity. In fact, there have been studies that say that employees who spend 12 to 15 minutes a week learning about the tools, the features, the capabilities of their cloud productivity environments will be up to 16% more productive when using those tools than people who don't spend that 15 minutes a week. And that's not a lot of time. That's 3 minutes a day. And then the final is migration, the willingness to move. Oh yeah, we're moving up to Office 365, but nope, I don't want to get rid of my physical file server. Why not? Well, I control it. You control the cloud. If it's on a physical file server for people to access it, they're going to need to remote in, they're going to need a VPN, they're going to need to do some internet web-based mapping that's going to require security products and software and management. Or let's replace that file server with a cloud-based file service where people can access it, it's secure, you still control it, you can still manage it. So we do still see challenges with people's willingness to move and use the capabilities and understand them as part of the migration process. So all of that has to come in to your plans and your play as you prepare for what's next. So what are our expectations? The big expectation is uncertainty. When people ask me how long I think we're going to be in this state where there'll be restrictions, where markets will be impacted, where businesses are going to open and close, realistically, when the duration is unknown, but I can tell you that we're not going to clear things up until there's a vaccine that we know is safe and effective, and enough of the population has been vaccinated to make it an effective measure of protection. And so it's not even that the vaccine exists, it's how quickly does enough of the population get vaccinated to make it effective? And how long do we have to wait before we actually know that the vaccine is safe and effective? And so, someone said, well, what if there's a vaccine in January? We're probably 6 to 9 months away from coming out of this at the other end. And January is a pretty aggressive time to have a vaccine ready, even though some of the trials are profitable. So realistically, we're probably in this situation for another 12 months, maybe 18 months before we really know that we're in the clear. So open and closures are going to happen. Over time, hopefully, the trend right now will get reversed, and we'll get to a situation where flare-ups are local and are managed as such. But nevertheless, that could affect your business, it could affect your customers, and therefore your business as well. So be ready for that. Be ready for that uncertainty, and don't stop communicating with your clients, with your suppliers, to understand where they're at and what their expectations are and what their plans are, so you can fit in with them and you can adapt. The other expectation I'll share is that whatever becomes normal, there's no going back, right? There rarely ever is. You're always going forward in some way. So the normal will be different. And there will be some changes that have happened now that will become permanent. We've talked about a few of them. How we hire, how we support our staff, where our people are working. The view of physical workplaces is different now than it was. Does this mean more people are going to say, you know what, co-working space, so I have a place out of the house if I need something, if I'm too distracted by the dog in the fridge? Or is it going to the office? Is it full-time? Is it hybrid? Is it remote all the time? We talked with one business that is looking at using co-working space to have pods available where people will work remotely from home, but if they want to go in and have social interaction with other employees of the company, they can sign up online, and there'll be a 6-person office in a co-working space. And, up to six people can request to go in and work for the day, or a team of 6 that needs to meet or wants to meet in person can take the space for the day and be creative around that. The other thing I expect is going to be different is personal priorities. One of the things we hear from people is that working from home, the loss of the commute for many has given them hours a day that they didn't have. And that's hours with their family. It's time to connect with friends. It's time to, think about all the people who are working remotely who are still baking and doing crafts and reading and binge watching cool TV shows or checking out the new movies on the different streaming services. All of those non-work activities, in many cases, have been enabled. Yes, in some cases, unfortunately, it's enabled because of unemployment or underemployment, but in many cases, it's enabled simply because, hey, I'm not spending 45 minutes to an hour and a half getting from my home to the office every day and back. And I sort of like the impact that has. And so I expect that people's personal priorities, call it work-life balance, call it what you will, are going to shift because of the actual experience that we're living through now. And when you think about people who've had sickness and death in their family because of this, and people who know people who've had that, the personal connection, the family relationships, the friendships, expect those priorities to be higher in people's mind when they look at their work situation as we come out of this on the other end. And the human factors involved could very well be transformative to the workplace and how we manage and run our businesses. And looking forward, the good news is we're at a point right now with cloud as a backbone enabling technology, with certain applications and systems that ease our ability to communicate and collaborate, to socialize remotely, be prepared to really understand how to use the power of those tools to create a cohesive workforce that fits and allows people with their personal priorities to fit in and work well with you. You'll keep your talent. You'll keep your good talent more easily. You'll attract better talent with that, and your people will be more productive, and your business will have better results. So what's your action plan? I keep using the airline pilot term. In crisis, the first thing you do is aviate, keep the plane from crashing. Once you can do that, navigate where are you, which direction are you going in, how are you going to get there, and is there a safe place to land? And then once you got that figured out, let everyone else know what's going on. That really fits in a model that's a repetitive cycle of assessing where you are, taking action, managing it, and reassessing. And so let's talk. Now is a good time as things have opened up and we sort of get a sense of the uncertainty and this, I don't want to say it's a steady state for a bit, whether it's a month or 6 months, who knows, but well, some places are going to open up, some are going to close down. It's going to be this waffling of the economy, no clear success, no clear failure, a lot of uncertainty. Step back. What results and outcomes do you want during this next 6 months? What are the changes and impacts that are happening to your business or you need to make, and what are your needs or priorities to be successful? With that, come up with a strategy, have your tactics, and act on it. And whenever you make a decision, define the value proposition. Is it the return that you expect to get from it, or are you avoiding loss? And what's the cost of doing nothing? Take that all into consideration, and then manage your change, manage your projects, manage your operations, and gather the information, qualitative and quantitative, to know if your actions and how you're managing them are taking them to your desired outcomes, and if not, alter the course. And so what do we have to offer and how can we help? Because technology and technology savvy, or savvy use of technology is probably a better way to put it, comes into play. One of the things we're offering is a COVID-19 response and recovery assessment. It's a free service we're offering. Hey, we can offer our time and our expertise. That's our greatest value to our customers, right? So we'll give that away for free for a little bit to help your business understand, plan, and prepare. It's a free, there's no obligation around it. There's a form on our website. You request the assessment, you fill it out, we'll schedule, it runs about a 30-minute, we'll do it by video call. We'll talk through your issues, we'll come up with, talk about high-level plans and options. We have a second assessment that's a lot more involved that we also have available, and we're happy to waive and discount those fees as appropriate to help you move forward as well. So we've got tools, we're here to help, we're here to listen and share ideas. Sometimes the solutions will be things we do, sometimes, and many times it's not. We'll point you to other sources and other resources and help make those connections as well to be successful. So to wrap up, it's a good time for Q&A. If you have any questions, I've covered a lot of ground. It hasn't just been about technology, it's been about business and politics and the external factors that we're trying to deal with. As always, you can contact us, info@cumulusglobal.com. Our toll-free and standard numbers are on the screen as well. If you want to, contact me directly, afalcon@cumulusglobal.com. The direct line to my desk, I don't have an assistant, it rings on my desk, is there as well. I will tell you, if I'm busy, I don't answer the phone, and I'm not great about checking and answering voicemails. The best way to reach me is that email address. And so whether you're watching live or watching on the recording, if you have any questions at any point in time, contact us at Cumulus Global, contact me directly. We'll work to find an answer. I'll connect you with the right members of my team to assist you and move you forward. And so for the folks watching this on demand, I want to thank you for time taken to do that. Appreciate it. Please feel to contact me with any follow-up, any questions, any concerns, or ideas you might have, or just to help gather additional information. Happy to share that and provide that as well. At this point, I'm going to end the recording, and I'll go back a slide, and we'll reopen up for Q&A for those who are on live. So thanks for joining us here this afternoon. Have a great day. Have a great week. Be well and be safe.